Welcome to It's What Our Characters Would Do, the podcast where a neutral good ranger and a chaotic nooch warlock talk about RPGs.
I'm sorry. A chaotic what warlock?
I think you heard me. Roll funny dice, give away some sweet loot, I'm Bob World Builder.
And I'm Grace World Destroyer.
And today we're talking about some random games that we played recently. But first, Grace, how are you feeling?
I'm sick.
Yeah, Grace feels a little under the weather.
Yeah, I have a cold. I got it at work, and I hate it.
Yeah, she's been a little sniffly, so you might get some awesome ASMR sniff.
Yep.
Wow, all right, well, don't indulge
No,
it.
cut that one out.
But besides that, I don't know, I'm feeling pretty good. We had our, sort of related, I guess, to the topic of this episode, had our first session of a totally homebrew DCC campaign yesterday. Played a lot of little one-shots of DCC, like played and run a bunch. And I had planned to basically start this campaign over a year ago, but just for various reasons that didn't really pan out. But it's also like I'm way more in a better place about how I want it to go now. So we just had kind of a session 0 yesterday, and that was really fun. So I'm excited to do some prep later today for what the next things will be like. We got Gen Con coming up.
Ah, yes. I'm going to try really hard not to be sick at Gen Con.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like by then it'll blow over.
Yeah, I'll be fine.
Did you want to say anything besides you're sick?
No.
Okay. So, in that case, we're ready to get into the quick build, where we try to summarize the topic/goal for this episode in exactly 3d6 words. I'm rolling, and Grace will describe this.
Yeah, we can't remember who did it last time.
Only 6 words. That's quite low.
We play stuff besides D&D.
Sometimes.
I wanted to say you should try it too, but I definitely didn't have enough words for that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the lowest counts I ever did. Interesting. Anyway, yeah, that's pretty much the premise. I think we've already done an episode like this. I honestly couldn't remember. It sounded very familiar when I first put this topic in a poll a couple weeks ago.
We have done something like this.
Right. And I don't remember which games we talked about then, to be honest. But today, well, actually, maybe I won't spoil it all right up front. But we can start by talking about the one that listeners are probably most familiar with, or maybe have heard the most about, which was recently. We did a little one-shot run by Grace World Destroyer over here. So why don't you tell us about what this game is, huh?
So we played Shadow Dark, which I was actually between 2 systems when I was thinking what I wanted to run this in. I was either going to do Shadow Dark or Knave.
Yeah.
But I chose Shadow Dark. But basically it is a spooky forest setting that I made using some rule sets from the book Into the Word and Wild by Charles Ferguson Avery, which is a book that I loved the vibe. And like there's harvesting rule sets and like magic rule sets that I think are really neat. So I used those, and I was building this setting. I have a list on my phone titled "The Most Horrible Things I Can Think of." And it's just me, like, every creepy, spooky, scary scene or monster that comes into my head, I write it down on there, not to be like, welcome to my dark and twisted mind, and so edgy, but it's no holds barred on that list.
There's a lot of the horror, like more than spooky forest, it was definitely, the ideas in the list anyway, definitely more along the lines of horror forest.
Yeah, actual horror, not just spooky horror, but like and not fun spooky Halloween.
I would say some of that definitely came through in the session, not as much as I thought. I feel like, based on what I had heard and seen you adding to the list, I feel like there was definitely some like creepier things in there.
Yeah. So I ran an adventure called just like Lair of the Skull Hag or something like that. And it was just a hag had come to live in the woods near your village and took your village's last milk cow and winter was coming. And that cow was needed to put your village through the winter pretty much. And that's important because like a big aspect of this setting is like hopelessness and despair. Like the woods will eventually overcome your village and everybody will die and you're just doing what you can to live one season longer. So your party went into the woods to save the cow, possibly. Encountered a lot of disembodied faces.
Yeah, it was mostly faces.
A lot of faces, and that's because the skull hag collects faces.
Which is cool.
Yeah. She just has a skull, but she collects other people's faces. And I had emphasized that it's important to avoid danger where you can, but that getting into danger has rewards.
Of course.
Usually.
Yeah.
But you did mostly avoid the danger, which is probably why it wasn't as creepy as you thought it would be.
Maybe
because
so.
You didn't do the creepy stuff so much.
Yeah. Yeah, like one of the first things that I remember was just when we entered the forest, which was through this kind of mystical archway that just suddenly appeared. And I believe that archway also had a face, like at the kind of keystone of it.
Yep.
The path was just lined with faces attached somehow to the trees, all like literally facing in on the pathway we had to walk. And as we entered, I wanted us to go quickly to try to catch up as best we could to the cow and whatever took it. And when we moved quickly, it had pretty much immediately made one of the faces scream and then summoned. It was just like a snake of some sort. I don't remember if there was anything particular about the snake.
It didn't summon it in like a magical way. It just like drew the attention of a monster that was in there.
Yeah.
And it attacked you.
And so pretty much from then on, I was like, okay, I'm being way more cautious.
Gotta be careful.
Because we also almost, like, any of us could have died in that first encounter.
But Dan came through with spell casting, which I knew like was going to be really powerful because the spells in the Word and Wild book are very like loosely defined.
Sure.
So I made it so that spells always consume their components, and every time you cast, I kind of adapted the Shadow Dark casting rule where you don't lose the spell if you fail at casting it, but you have the potential to get a call of the wild. And that's something in the Word and Wild book. And once you get 3 calls, you become...
You're out.
You become a word witch, and you are no longer accepted in society, and you are just drawn into the depths of the wood, pretty much. But I don't think he got any calls. And that makes me think I need to make spellcasting even harder because it was so powerful. I think it did so much damage that it was kind of insane compared to what everyone else could do.
Yeah, I remember in the final battle, that's what allowed us to take out the witch rather quickly, or take out the totem thing that she had.
Yeah,
maybe,
you destroyed
and
the
then
totem,
destroyed the
and
witch
that killed the witch
time.
or the hag.
But we used like oil to basically prime it, and then I think he lit it on fire. Went up really quick. Off the top of my head, I'm struggling to remember the encounters in between. Did we like climb a cliff or
climbed a cliff that was
a bog?
That was a bodak hive, and you could have explored the hive. Or not a bodak, that's a different thing.
There was something else in the crags of these cliffs.
But you didn't go in there.
And
so
we knew they had
that.
treasure. Right. And that was a good trade-off that you had set up though. Like if we happened to just find enough treasure to buy another cow, then that would also basically be a victory for us. And we knew there was treasure in these cliffs, we knew there'd be treasure somewhere in these cliffs, I guess, because these creatures were known to
There would be treasure
hoard
in the hive, but the creatures in there were dangerous.
Yeah.
But if you were stealthy enough, like you could have gotten in and out, but you didn't take that chance.
Yeah. Yeah, it was tricky because it was definitely like we were level 1 Shadow Dark, which basically means like around 4 or 5 hit points at most, or I guess if you're lucky, like 8. And so like one or two hits, pretty much.
I mean, while we were doing like the character building and stuff, it was like, but we're going to be so weak. And I'm like, yeah, that's the point. You're supposed to be weak. And then you weren't weak enough. And that made the game like less scary. Like the stakes didn't feel as high.
Oh, yeah. And we did have backup. So we probably should have. Yeah, that's so weird. I feel like that immediately left my brain once we had that first encounter or something. So, anyway.
But yeah, you made it to the end. Yeah. You completely avoided like a big battle with the hag's main like guardian monster. Like you didn't even see it, so that's another thing.
Oh, was that the thing in the marsh?
No, the marsh there was like a ghost or something, or ghouls or something. But
interesting.
There was one part of the woods that was just really dark, and there were all those cocoons. And the thing that was guarding that space, like you just snuck past it, and then something allowed you to see past the hag's illusion to get through to her actual altar.
So a lot of luck in our favor as well with the dice rolls and stuff, how it all turned out.
But you saved the cow, destroyed the hag's totem, so she was destroyed, and saved your village only for another season.
Right.
But eventually the woods would overtake and the village would be destroyed.
Yeah.
But an alternate ending to that was you could have entered into a deal with the hag.
Of course.
Where she
offered us, right away. She gave us the idea to sacrifice one person from our village every year, I think.
Yeah. At the first new moon of each season, she would take one person from your village.
Yeah.
But your village would be protected from the forest because she would have a vested interest in making sure people in your village continued to multiply and provide her with sacrifices.
Yeah. I think I was the one who approached first because I remember saying something like their lives are not ours to give or something. So yeah, it's good trade-offs. I really did enjoy it. I think it would have been more fun to do more sessions of it too, because that way it's like, I don't know. I guess that's also a trade-off because we should have been riskier knowing it was just a one-shot. We should have taken more risks. But for some reason, at least I was just so on edge, I guess, after that first encounter and didn't want to. And then, but if there were more sessions, there's also more likely of the magic resulting in the calls and things like that. So that would be a fun thing to bring back around Halloween or something.
Yeah, I need to and this is what I'm still planning to run at Green Dragon Fest. Next year. So I need to develop more areas of the wood, which the Roten Well it's called.
Yeah.
And just make it so that it can just be explored like wilderness and things can be found, but also create dungeons inside, which the Word and Wild book has a great set of tables for.
Yeah. All right. So other things that we played, I will just briefly mention because I already just talked about it a bit. We played some DCC just yesterday, and that was using a lot of materials, some of which I just published on Patreon. So by the time this goes up, it'll still just be on Patreon, but within a week or so, it'll be on DriveThruRPG. A bunch of random tables that I made for creating a Skyrim-like setting. Scrim. Again, this is something I've worked on and off for a year and a half now, but it was very much just me overthinking and being super tedious about creating these tables and really crunching numbers of Skyrim of, okay, wait, how many towers are actually in this setting compared to how many forts there are and that sort of thing. And then trying to translate that to random 2d6 rolls on tables. So it's weirdly very accurate, but then also you're still creating it randomly, which it kind of came out exactly as I would have hoped. Whereas basically I have created just kind of what I refer to as a skeleton of a map where I decided where there are forests and grasslands and swamps and mountains and a coastline. But then in every hex, out of about 100 hexes, each one has some kind of site. So the things I mentioned, as well as caves and mines, and some of them are just hazards and all the other things that you might find in Skyrim, camps and cabins and things like that. In addition to those being an obvious inspiration, the other main one really was just DCC going through kind of tediously every monster in the core book to see if they had listed any habitats for them and then assigning them 2 tables based on that, and still kind of organizing the tables. So you're more likely to encounter the lower hit die creatures. And another step was also coming up with how many like monsters appearing, number appearing, whatever that used to be in like the old school books for each one as well. So basically just giving myself this complete tool set so I would have to think as little as possible when actually prepping sessions. And it led to a pretty fun session yesterday. I don't want to dwell on that too much. More to come later. What did you think of us playing? Yeah, we'll go back to another one that you ran.
Cats of Cthulhu. I just ran a one-shot of this. I don't remember what was going on, but like a bunch of people couldn't come to our session, so I ran a little like mystery kind of adventure and the Cats of Cthulhu is a game where you are just regular cats.
Yeah.
Normal
You're
cats.
Not an eldritch horror
can't speak
cat necessarily.
Can't do magic. Can only do things that cats can do because like you don't have hands.
You can hold a single item
in your mouth. You can hold one thing, but when you do, you have to hold a pencil in your mouth.
As a player.
Yeah, as the player, you have to hold a pencil in your mouth, and you can't take it out. If you take it out, that means you drop the thing that you're carrying. It's called the rule of one thing. But I ran it in Waterdeep.
Right.
Like, in between the time that your characters were, like, had finished,
our Dragon Heist campaign.
Finished the Dragon Heist
before the Baldur's Gate campaign.
Going
that Grace
into
descent.
Before descending into Avernus.
Exactly.
And the person that you had basically hired to take care of the Trollskull Manor for you noticed that there was a rat problem, so she just brought in a bunch of cats off the street and
a bunch of street cats.
Yeah, a bunch of street cats, and had them try to take care of the rats.
Yeah. Now, each of us weren't exactly regular cats.
Okay, that's true. Because I saw like a choose your fighter meme on r/Wonkus, I think.
Probably Wonkus.
And I created a cat for each of the choose your fighter options.
Right. So there were probably about a dozen, maybe more, of these cat meme like images.
And each one
kind
had
of fried,
Each one had a special ability. So like one of them could use weapons, and it didn't explain exactly how they use these weapons, but like they just could. One of them,
Kevin could drive.
Kevin could drive. And then one of them like could perfectly mimic other humans just by putting on a hat of some kind, and this would even fool humanoids.
Yeah. There was the biter. There was the nibbler. I don't remember the difference between them.
The biter could bite anything.
As an attack, right.
Even like ghosts and stuff.
Could chew through anything.
And nibbler could chew through wood and stone and everything like that.
Yes, and I played as Binky Dinkle, who could see into other planes or something, or like see invisible creatures or something.
Yeah, I think it was something like that, because Binky Dinkle in the picture has huge eyes.
Yeah.
And then there is a quote unquote cat that one of the characters had.
Right. One of the characters from the proper campaign was a familiar cat.
Not a familiar,
but it wasn't
just
really...
a pet.
Okay.
Just a pet, just a regular pet cat that you guys always thought was a familiar, and be like, can you like ask him to do this, or like look through his eyes? And Dan would just be like, no, he's just a cat. But he was a cat who could spin webs.
Right.
And sounded like this. And Jerry decided to play that cat because I put that as an option.
Yeah, so basically we played through this really great mystery that you had set up. We did a lot of antics just kind of running around the Trollskull Manor, but then got down to it and tracked these rats, realized they were being put into our tavern by some people who were working with a neighboring tavern keeper to, I guess, like ruin our owner's business so that theirs could thrive. And we didn't actually realize this. I think you just mentioned it afterward, that the people leaving these rats were were-rats.
Yeah.
But it was crazy because we we just basically caused some antics in that other bar.
Well, you solved the problem by burning down the other bar.
Right. And then the final antic, if you will, the ultimate antic was basically exploding almost the bar. We somehow
one of the cats
knew that alcohol would burn.
Yeah, I forget. Oh, so one of the cats was like a human expert. I think him was because he could like mimic
humans,
people and knew somehow about Molotov cocktails. And so you made one.
Yeah, and just lit that candle, baby.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about a little. We played some One Ring. This was from the One Ring starter set, where everybody's hobbits, and that was also kind of some little pitter patter of hobbit feet was heavily featured, and that was also kind of antic-like, where the main challenge is set up, spoilers, I guess, for the first two missions in the starter set. You're conscripted by Bilbo Baggins himself to steal a map from a museum, essentially, that is like to the southwest of Bag End, but still in part of the Shire. And the main challenges were crossing a river, which you did by
we borrowed
hailing
a
boatman somehow.
Yeah. We had to explain, we had to do some social encounter to explain why we were in this village. Because the thing about Hobbiton is everybody's really nosy and gossipy.
Yeah.
So I think the lie we told was one of our party members was interested in a young lady in the town, and we were there to help him
to court, I guess. and then it was basically breaking into this museum in the night while also avoiding the eyes of the Bounders.
And I think we used fire to do that as well.
You did. There was a street light and happened to be a cart of hay nearby, or you guys rolled one up to it anyway, and then knocked the candle, I think, out of the street light, and then just sent this flaming cart down the street to distract all the guards. And also did a little bit of splitting the party, where you went in a different I think everybody went in different entrances.
Well, they really wanted to go in the skylight, but I was like, I'm just going to go in the door.
One of them just went, you went in a basement door. One of them went in the front door, and one of them went in the skylight. But fortunately, the whole place, it wasn't mapped. It was just very ambiguous. You were really the only one in a separate area, I guess. And everybody just had a similar check to actually get in. The trap door from the basement to the main area was just blocked by a bunch of pottery and stuff that would make a lot of noise if you didn't do it stealthily. Through the skylight, it was just safely making the landing, I guess. And then going in the front door, actually, I don't think involved any checks because it was just unlocked. It was unlocked unless you guys had alerted the Bounders if they had enough time to go and lock the door thinking that something was amiss. But none of that happened. And then there was also a guard dog inside the museum that turned out just to be the owner's little terrier. If you guys, I don't remember if the interactions with that.
I don't remember what we did with it.
It might have just been asleep, and you guys were able to be stealthy enough then that it didn't cause any issues. And then there was a second quest that we did in the same session of play that I can't remember it all off the top of my head right now.
We had to save a girl from a troll.
Oh gosh, yeah. It was tracking down, from some famous Hobbit lore, the club used by, and his name's going to slip my mind right now, but the Hobbit who was, legend tells that he was almost as large as a man and could ride a proper-sized horse and knocked off the head of a goblin lord in, whatever century ago and invented the game of golf at the same time when it landed in a rabbit hole. That's all stuff from The Hobbit. These books are very well researched, so I really enjoyed, just as a fan of The Lord of the Rings, reading through the quests and even the rules in general. It's really cool to see how well the One Ring is built around those ideas and really does evoke that. And to talk about the system for a second, I guess, it is kind of D6 pool, where, like a lot of other games of this measure, you have a ranking in different skills, and you roll a number of D6s based on your ranking, but you also always roll a D12, and it incorporates a little bit of advantage, disadvantage type of thing, where you can roll 2d12 for favored or ill-favored, taken to higher or lower, and there's different indicators on the dice, though, like rolling a 6 on any of your 6s can build up toward critical successes. But it was a lot of fun. It definitely seemed like something I would want to try again with the full rulebook, which we also have, where you can be other things besides just hobbits. And we played one other game somewhat recently, a diceless role-playing game.
For the Queen. I loved this game.
Yeah, it was way more fun than I expected, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, if our listeners haven't seen the actual play so this is it
made
Critical
by
Role
Darrington
made
Press?
it? Yeah,
Yeah.
Darrington Press. They played a session of it where it's just like a game where you pull cards that ask you questions, and you have to answer those questions as if you are a party guarding a queen on her way to some kind of diplomatic meeting.
Yeah. And all the questions revolve around your relationships to the queen, and everybody just gets to make up anything.
Yeah,
So,
which is why it's so
super
fun.
freeing.
Like we did like twists on twists on twists.
Yeah, it's kind of like everybody's the game master.
Yeah, so I mean it's funny and like intriguing at the same time. It can really probably depends on who you're playing with, but
Yeah.
all of our co-players are really into role playing. So that was fun. And I think at our first game, the queen was like dead, or like we decided
We weren't sure if
we
she
weren't
was or
sure. We were
something.
escorting like a palanquin that we weren't allowed to look inside, and then eventually we did look inside, but it wasn't the queen in there. It was her sister who the queen had killed, and then the queen was actually like
Yeah, I remember pretty much zero details from any of this because it was all off the cuff and kind of in one ear out the other for me, like in a fun way. But I don't know. That's how I am with most media. Like if I'm really invested in it, I don't remember it well, actually. Like I'm not committing it to memory because I'm just very in the moment. So it was a lot of fun. So I remember thinking going into it that like, well, if you play this with the same group, you're going to kind of, you're always going through the similar questions. The game's just going to kind of play out the same way. But we played it twice in a row with the exact same group of only 4 players. And both things ended up like pretty different. So it definitely seemed fun. Definitely would want to play it again and with different people from our group. And I was commenting afterward that like this would be a really fun game to play on like trips and things because it's just a little deck of cards. You could play it in the car, bring it anywhere. Like it's just really easy and like super low stakes.
Yep, highly recommend this game.
All right, let's take a little break and then we'll come back and answer some questions. Now it's time for a random encounter, where we roll to read your stories and questions, generally about this topic, and the person who wrote our favorite story or question takes home... Oh my gosh, I never even mentioned the loot! It's a mystery set of dice for only crits.
Oh, surprise!
Woo! Yeah, I guess I somehow got distracted in the beginning of the episode. Weird. Anyway, let's roll a d4. Rather, you could just pull from those 4 cards that I grabbed because I forgot we had these things to use. Draw 20, a d20 deck of cards, so we don't repeat rolls and have to re-roll a bunch.
2.
From Kevin Broussard. Have you considered breaking away from classic fantasy? Things that use a modern or sci-fi setting. A few recommendations I've got for new games are Blades in the Dark, the Dresden Files RPG, Fate System, and Animon Story, a knockoff Pokemon/Digimon game. Still looking for a good space.
That's
myself.
one that we didn't talk about.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that because I realized, I could have put out my sheet from the playtest. So yes, in fact, we have considered playing just such a game. I'm very slowly but surely working. Well, actually, I mean, a lot of it's done, I guess you could say. I mean, not done. It still needs to be more play tested. But I'm writing a Pokemon-inspired RPG, kind of based off of the Goons and Ghosts that made by J.P. Couvert. At least as far as the character creation goes, the rules a little bit different. Like as far as combat goes, of course, you're playing as like a trainer who has multiple monsters. Yeah, we didn't discuss it. And I don't know, it feels like not the right time to go into it right now. Maybe that's a different episode down the line or something when it's more developed.
I do think our group mostly leans toward high fantasy as a preference for role playing, so it's probably not something we would do like a very long campaign.
I agree.
Of like
100%.
anything that wasn't high fantasy.
Yeah.
But we do also have the Crystal Punk book. That's kind of like
5e.
Like a sci-fi fantasy mashup that
Definitely.
I'm still interested in running, but you know, the spooky forest thing is kind of at the forefront of what I'm working on right now.
Like, you and I have played a little Monster of the Week, which was totally modern day. We played some Call of Cthulhu. We played Candela.
Yeah, Candela.
Which is not high fantasy. So, yes, we've dabbled, but Grace, you nailed it. Like, I think when it comes to playing these games in long-term campaigns or whatever you would call it, I definitely prefer fantasy stuff. And maybe I could see that changing over time, you know, after we do this for like decades and decades, I guess. But yeah, because I do like sci-fi and these other genres of fiction, but fantasy is just where it all began for me. So yeah.
1.
From Guru Gru. The story of trying out different games is being in a bit of a spiral for months after deciding to leave 5e. I've looked at dozens of games, bought tons of PDFs, and now own several physical OSR books. I wanted to leave 5e for several reasons, but I'm finding it hard to switch to something else. Despite its flaws, I'm super familiar with 5e, which almost makes it comforting. I totally get that. I really do think a more OSR game has tons of benefits. I've just been having a hard time settling on one. I just need to buckle and take the plunge of running one, even though many of the conventions of these older games are quite different in design and philosophy from 5e. In summary, I think a lot of us want to leave 5e, even though on the surface it is deep and wide enough to cover decades of gameplay. The system isn't great, but it's easy enough to understand and use that it's hard to leave. Yeah, 5e obviously does like a ton of things right. Which I think is why it's super popular, and why even I've said over and over that while I'm into a lot of these other games, our campaigns that we've been playing have been just homebrewed 5e, and when I'm running, more sticking to like the lowest levels of 5e, because I like some of the danger of more like OSR scene stuff that I feel is lost pretty much once you hit like 4th level in 5e. Or at least I could say danger is lost without just having really long drawn out battles, because everybody's hit points are so high, monsters and players included. What, are you holding back a sneeze?
I'm not holding it back. I'm trying to draw it out, but it's being shy.
I don't know. What's your take on that?
I forgot. The sneeze made me forget what.
Okay, well, basically, I don't know. They're bringing up the idea of like leaving 5e, and I think that kind of is this false dichotomy that a lot of people bring up, where it's like you can only play one system.
Yeah, you don't have to stop playing a game forever.
Like, if anything, that's the takeaway of this episode, and every time we do an episode like this, is just try other things out, and then just Frankenstein your own game out of what you like. You know, that's kind of what we've always done. That's how my friends have always played every game. The classic example being like when we were in middle school and we would play like Risk. We just made it up, like, completely. Like, we didn't read the rules. That's just how we've always done games.
I mean, there's a call to leave 5e because of some of the bad decisions that Wizards of the Coast has made with it. But I don't know. It's like, you don't have to let that impact you playing the game.
Yeah. And another huge takeaway is, like, don't mix up 5e with Dungeons and Dragons, like TM, because 5e is Tales of the Valiant now. 5e is Advanced Level Up 5e.
True, yeah, other people publishing stuff.
5e is pretty much Shadowdark. Like, I know Kelsey based it on basic OSR, or not even OSR, on basic D&D, but like it runs pretty similar. Obviously, the characters are much more simple, but it's D20, roll high, advantage, disadvantage. You have a class and a race, and you fight owlbears and dragons. Like,
you don't have to give.
Many of these games are all the same thing.
You don't have to give any money to Wizards of the Coast anymore to play 5e.
Yeah, it's in Creative Commons. There's Nimble 5e now. DC 20 is definitely more different, but still based on it. And honestly, you can get the exact same feel and flavor of like superhero 5e by playing Daggerheart, which is a completely different system. It depends on your reasons for wanting to try something else. So if you actually say leave 5e as in wanting to try a different game, then yeah, trying some of these OSR games or maybe some of the things mentioned in the last question would be good things to try. But no pressure. Just do whatever's fun. And if that's 5e, play 5e.
4.
Also from Guru. You've checked out some of the 5e OSR hybrids, such as 5 Torches Deep, but have you checked out some of the OG D&D games, such as various basic lines from the 80s? I would love it if you covered some of those older games. Not really.
They seem really complicated.
Yeah, so the one that I've read the most is AD&D 1E. Which is, the famous like Gygaxian language, and it's like super small font, very dense writing and layout, and that's why everyone loves Old School Essentials, I guess, because it's taking those books but then just putting them in a much more legible format. So that's the only one that I've really dived into. And yes, I've heard, like many people have told me in comments over and over on like other videos that it's like, Bob, you need to read basic D&D. You'll love it. Blah, blah. And it's like, I mean, probably. Like it'll probably be good, but I really don't think it could be as good as something like Shadowdark, which takes that and just modernizes it with rules I already know and love. I think it'll just be more convoluted because back then people literally were worse at designing games. They're just not as far along in development and innovation.
Yeah, there wasn't any predecessors at that point.
Yeah, like they were forging the path, not trying to belittle, those games, but like they're not going to be as well designed basically as the stuff that comes out today, I think. Obviously, I can't knock it, I guess, until I try it, but I'm not in a rush to try it. So that's that. This last one comes from J. Kevin Carrier. Playing a more rules-light game, did you miss having all the specific class features and feats that a 5e character would have to draw on, or do you still feel like you had plenty of options? What do you think about that, Grace?
I feel like classic 5e characters have too many options to draw upon that you don't even use 90% of your sheet.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
And it's like things get buried in it.
Yeah.
You forget. Like when we played the final battle against, why is the name already slipping my head? Who is the boss of Baldur's Gate? What's her name? The leader of Avernus. Zariel. I remember during the session, Ben was like, "Oh wait, yeah, no, but I have this thing that whatever."
Yeah, because he had the sword of Zariel, and there was just like a million like things that sword could do. It was insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, using Fortune Faceeager as an example, one of the things that made me want to make her a mastermind rogue was the ability to mimic other people's mannerisms and accents. And I think I used that one time to help us get passage on a ship and never used it again because it just like there were so few situations that I could use that instead of just my ability to charm people. So
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
because that's kind of a better version of
or
better way to reach the outcome. Your
low level stuff just like kind of disappears,
fades away
because it's not going to be as good as anything else that you can do.
Yeah.
So no, I don't really miss it because I don't feel like all of that is necessary.
I kind of feel the same way, and I go back to this sort of thing all the time. But like in the first campaign that I played, we pretty much just made up our characters with the GM, like made up what their classes were like, their races were like, their features, pulling some stuff from the 5e book that he knew about. But otherwise it was just, hey, like, what do you think would be cool for your character to be able to do? And that's how we made them up, and like when we would level up, gaining a feature or so. And often just improving things. So even though we had fewer things, it was exactly what we wanted them to have and exactly what we wanted to use. And then if something turned out to be too powerful or not as fun, we would just change it. Again, and I'm not trying to put out any kind of your fun is wrong here, but that's just my opinion on it, is that a lot of things will get lost and just be underused or unused completely. Because 5e kind of gives you, all these kitchen appliances that do one job really well, where I'd rather have the chef's knife that can be used in many ways.
You can cut a carrot with it. You can open a can. You can stab your sous chef who's not working fast enough.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
That's a perfect way to wrap this up, I think. and for sharing our favorite story/question. This episode's loot winner is Guru Gru for the great topic of reminding us all there are many ways to have fun with 5e and tons of other games, which was really the spirit of this episode. So you're going home with a mystery set of dice from Only Crits. Woo!
Good job.
And if you like this episode, please share it with a friend and destroy that like button.
Finally!
Wow, finally.
It's my time!
Please subscribe and consider supporting the station directly by joining as a YouTube channel member or as a patron. Our members and patrons get early access to every episode, and patrons get other cool rewards like a private RSS link to listen through your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for your support, and keep building.
Stop building.